Hello, welcome and good morning. I'm Josh Coyote. Today's worship. Today is our March 6th, 2020 person and service. Reverend Kevin Carson, Rick Allen, and I bring you welcome to this morning, this day, and this weekly announcements are some of you have updated your email, had changed email addresses. IdahoFallsUU.org. Check on our website for information on how to get the emailed announcements if you're not getting them. If you're online, could sign into the chat box to tell us who you are so we know who's joining us that way. We'll be having joys, sorrows after for all ages. We're in the sanctuary. There's slips of paper over there. Add one. If you're online, put it in the chat box and mark it as a joy, concern, and sorrow. Let's see, we will probably have men's group this upcoming week on Friday, March 11th. Kathy is still trying to find where the location is for that. There is a garage cleanup. If there's anything in the garage that stay in the garage, make sure it is tagged before the Ides of March. And we need to mention how we stay afloat. The church is self-supporting. There are several ways you can donate. There's a basket by the door. There you can mail us a check, or you can PayPal donation. The address for mailing address and the PayPal donations are on our site on www.idahofallsuu.org. We gratefully receive any offering that. As I ring the peace bowl 3 times, takes deep breaths and relax. Time, righties. Now read our church covenant. Order of service. Love is the spirit of this community. Service is its law. This is our great covenant. Dwell together in love. Help one. I'll be lighting our church. Gather this hour, joys and sorrows, gifts, light this sign of our quest, share together.
Morning. Our call to worship this morning comes from a Homeric era hymn, Goddess Gaia, dates to around 800. Gaia, mother of all, I sing, oldest gods, firm of foundation, who feeds all creatures on earth. As many as move on the radiant land, swim in the sea, fly through the air, all these she feed bounty. Mistress, from you come our children, and bountiful harvests. Yours is the power to give mortals. I invite you to enjoy our opening hymn, number 134.
Sacred wood, Mary Sartre. A charm of columns crowds the leaves to be sudden rush of green, perspective that it grows. Rich lives of the trees, columns and green rush comes and goes, light bursting through. Copper shine and fall in the great area. Winter only goes, structure marvelous. Columns in a choir. Cloud has gone on this. Oh, answer to prayer. Ancient Roman parted. Very special time of creation. Each of us all can be up. Read the sorrows, concern. Sorrow from wrong. Like to light. Wife of Bob Getch. Wednesday was Roby's birthday with flowers and presents. Schaefer. Quality education. Jorgensen. very concerned about the water table. Valley, 500. Area appreciates our right to protest. Called off because Nancy Frank loves her books. Joyful to share them. Table in Jefferson. We light one more candle for all those sorrows, hearts. No, we lift up.
I have two readings this morning. First is from an interview with the astronaut Eugene Cernan, who was the last person to walk the moon. When you are in Earth orbit looking down, you see lakes, rivers, and peninsulas such as Florida or Baja California. You quickly fly over the changes in topography, like snow-covered mountains, deserts, tropical belts, all very visible. Pass through sunrise, sunset every 90 minutes. When you're in Earth orbit, you get a new perspective. 1 minute, you're over the United States. Next minute, you're over another area of the world. You can see pole to pole and ocean to ocean without even turning your head. You literally see North and South America go around the corner as the Earth turns on an axis you can't see, and then miraculously, Australia and then Asia, then all of America comes up to replace them. You ask yourself the question, where really am I in space and time? You don't see the barriers of color and religion and politics divide this world. You wonder, if you could get everyone in the world up there, wouldn't they have a different feeling, perspective? And my second reading comes from the book The Vanishing Face of Gaia, A Final Warning by James Lovelock. Is there any need to see Gaia, the only living planet in the solar system, space? It does matter, and it matters more than any other thing. We have to see it as it really is, because our lives are wholly dependent upon the living Earth. We could not survive an instant on a dead planet like Mars. We need to understand the differences. If we fail to take our planet seriously, we will be like children who take their homes for granted and never doubt that breakfast starts the day. We will not notice, as we enjoy our daily lives, that the cost of our neglect could soon cause the greatest tragedy, memory of humankind. The earth, in its but not our own interests, may be forced to move to a hot epoch, one where it can survive, although in a diminished, less habitable state. It is likely, if, as is likely, this happens, we will have been caused. I was an undergraduate at Vanderbilt University in the 1980s. I enjoyed the rich academic world of the university. I found myself exploring all sorts of subjects far beyond the boundaries of my physics major. My interests were so varied that I could have easily ended up graduating something very different from physics. And I began reading all kinds of books, especially books about religion, anthropology, environmental science. One of the books that really got my attention in those days was a slim volume by James E. Lovelock, published in 1979, called Gaia, New Look at Life on Earth. It was an overview of what became known as the Gaia hypothesis. I will speak more about in a moment. Every now and then in the years since, I've run across an article or book that either directly or indirectly alludes to the ideas Lovelock suggested about this fresh way of looking at the biosphere. After reading an online article about planetary intelligence ago, I thought it would be nice to revisit the topic of Gaia, especially with an eye on its spiritual implications. James Lovelock, who is still around these days at the age of 102, is a British scientist who consulted with NASA in the 1970s. His specialty was gas chromatography, and his main claim to fame was the invention of the electron capture detector, which revolutionized environmental analysis by making it easier to detect tiny amounts of atmospheric pollutants and other compounds. It was the first device capable, for example, of revealing that almost all life on Earth, including everyone in this room, has been contaminated with trace amounts of pesticides and other toxic chemicals from the industrial age. We don't know what this will mean for us in the long run, but the presence of these compounds in our tissues is undeniable. Lovelock's role at NASA focused on finding ways to detect life on planets, and Mars in particular. He began looking at the composition of the atmosphere on Earth compared to a planet such as Venus, where no life has been detected. What the science reveals is that the mixture of gases in Earth's atmosphere in a dynamically stable state that, in addition to noble gases like helium, includes gases that are either made by or processed by organisms. On a lifeless planet, for example, oxygen could not exist for very long in the amount we enjoy on Earth, since it would reach chemical equilibrium by reacting with other gases and with the minerals in the soil. It became clear that life on Earth, manipulating the atmosphere in a way that was favorable for the biosphere, flourish. So if you're looking for a way to find life on another planet, the idea was to use detectors on space probes to search for the presence of a similar distribution of gases evidence. Lovelock continued to explore this phenomenon of a life-altered world and reached out to other scientists to theory. Working with the American microbiologist Lynn Margulis, who is considered the co-founder of they named it Gaia in honor of the goddess. Lovelock summarized what he called the Gaia hypothesis as the idea that the Earth's biosphere is a self-regulating entity, capacity to keep our planet healthy by controlling the chemical and physical environment. In other words, theory proposes that Earth's living organisms interact with their inorganic surroundings in a way that is self-regulated in order to maintain the optimal atmospheric and climate conditions for life on Earth. As you can guess, once you start talking about complex self-regulating entities and even give it a name, it is easy to start imagining the biosphere as a living organism. And when you add to the mix the possibility that there is some purpose or intentionality that favors life, it's easy to see why many speak about Gaia as if, after all, there are clear parallels with all the characteristics we associate with other living beings. Whether or not Gaia is a she is arguably a product of Western prejudice that associates nurturing and life-giving qualities. But the earth has often been envisioned as a mother across cultures, whether it is Mother Nature or Pachamama. Even the name Earth comes from the Norse goddess Jörð, a female companion of Odin and mother of the thunder Thor. I suspect that Earth as mother is an archetype buried deep in the psyche, and I, for one, have no problem speaking of Gaia as the complexity of the Earth's biosphere is almost impossible to fathom. There are tens of millions of species, unique, represented by trillions of individuals, and they are scattered across myriad complex ecosystems that we are barely beginning to identify and understand. There are delicately balanced cycles, water transport that provide fresh water for the creatures who need it and maintain the proper salinity of the oceans that inhabit salt water. The percentage of oxygen in our atmosphere is maintained at a level that is ideal for the land creatures to survive. And the temperature for most of the planet is within a range that fits life. But if the idea that all of these living and inorganic systems that make up the biosphere can act in some coordinated way that seems far-fetched to you, I ask you, consider for a moment your own miraculous example. What I have described is analogous to the homeostasis or steady state of our bodies. Each of us is made up around 32 trillion cells, plus or minus a few trillion, depending on your size. And only about 43% of those are human cells. The rest, the 57% that isn't human, are microbes and other tiny parasites that make life possible, like the gut flora that facilitate digestion, or they're harmless and live on us through our time on Earth. To sustain this collection of cells that we call our self, we have to maintain a steady state or homeostasis through cooperation that is mutually beneficial. We drink water to stay hydrated, and we eliminate waste. We have systems to regulate the salinity of our blood and the proper balance of electrolytes. Breathe in oxygen, exhale carbon dioxide to allow our cells to metabolize food broken down into its simplest chemical components. We regulate our body temperature within a narrow range that is for our endocrine system to function and control all of the other systems, circulation and respiration. If any of our systems rest outside of the normal range, we become ill. We are 32 trillion cells cooperating in a grand symphony. And how often do we stop to think about all of it? Almost never. We mostly live and function as if we are a single self-sufficient organism, without considering either the ecosystem within or our role in habit. If you want to quickly dispel the idea of true self-sufficiency, try holding your breath forever. We cannot live for more than a few minutes without oxygen, and we had no role in production. It is a gift from the plants whom we share the earth. And with respect to our inner ecosystems, science journalist Ed Young summed it up nicely. All zoology is really ecology. We cannot fully understand the lives of animals without understanding our microbes and other symbioses in them. As you might imagine, there was pushback against the Gaia hypothesis from the beginning, and the criticism came in two basic forms. Many scientists rejected the idea of Earth as a single living organism as being far-fetched and requiring too much interspecies and intersystem cooperation to be realistic. Why, for example, would trees and other plants care whether the oxygen content of the atmosphere is good for life? Sure, a few tree species called depend on certain animals versus their seed. But for the most part, a higher carbon dioxide level translates happier, bigger. Wouldn't they prefer the climate change we're experiencing now? Others bristled at the idea that human beings are perhaps not as special, that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. And when the inevitable spiritual implications arose from that, it was simply too mystical. Those who wanted to keep things more secure and rational. Even Lynn Margulis, the co-founder of the theory, rejected the idea of granting Gaia living entity status, using terminology from the field of general systems theory, which looks at characteristics such as self-organizing that are common across all sorts of systems. She said Gaia was not an organism, but an emergent property of interaction, a series of interacting ecosystems that compose a single huge ecosystem at the Earth's surface, period. She was unwilling to make the conceptual leap, considering the Earth as an organism, though it would be easy to challenge how her description differs from how one would describe any multicellular organism. It is good science to challenge the details, and even the premise, Gaia hypothesis, such as how the particular mechanisms enable the different systems to communicate and to facilitate environmental controls. This is the way science works. And given the incredible complexity of the subject, there's plenty of work yet to do. But in recent decades, there have been remarkable discoveries that support Gaia theory. There's evidence, for example, that I spoke about in one of my previous sermons, that trees and other plants and fungi species in the forest have ways of communicating through chemical messages never imagined. We also have fossil evidence that in periods of the Earth's history when the atmospheric oxygen level exceeded 25%, there were more wildfires, and this reduced plant life and pumped more carbon into the atmosphere to bring it back to around the 21% joy. More and more of these feedback mechanisms are being discovered, though admittedly, these are incredibly complex systems to describe, let alone simulate for predictive analysis. Consider how hard it is to make an accurate weather forecast. Pushing back on the theory because it makes us uncomfortable to think of ourselves as analogous to cells within another organism requires a more philosophical self-examination. Challenges our ethics that have favored humanity else. For most of recent history, especially in Western, the world has been seen as merely a stage, and we humans as the poor players who strut and fret their hour upon it. No more. Human history is something that happened on the earth. And human beings were either made in God's image, or at least top rung of the evolution ladder. If we had purpose in life, it was for our individual edification or salvation, and not so much good earth. As the only species that collects and stores information from generation to generation, it is easy to see us as the brain or consciousness of Gaia. But are we comfortable with the idea? Does it diminish our individual lives to think of this? Or does it give us a greater sense of purpose? Lovelock uses the analogy, a thought experiment, of discovering an asteroid headed for the Earth as an example. Our scientific knowledge allows us to see the threat, and our political will and technology could cause us to cooperate and launch atomic bombs or some other means to bump it out of a collision course. Gaia avoids, and we benefit from kind. Is this Gaia responding to human beings? You could ask a similar question about the nerve cells in our hand sensing a hot stove and causing us to react and move the hand from the heat. The biologist Edward O. Wilson suggests that there's something inherent in human beings that makes us seek connection with other creatures. He calls it biophilia, urge to affiliate with life. Perhaps some deep psychic connection to Gaia you're feeling, or as Lovelock says, it may be that we are also programmed to recognize instinctively our optimal role in relation to others around us. When we act in accordance with this instinct in our dealings with our partners in Gaia, we are rewarded by finding that what seems right also looks good and arouses those pleasurable feelings that comprise our sense. When this relationship with our environment is spoiled or mishandled, we suffer from a sense of emptiness and privation. It may sound too mystical or pagan for some people to talk about Gaia being, even metaphorically, but I feel there's enough scientific evidence at least to consider the possibility. As someone who feels a spiritual connection to the idea of being part of the Gaia, not only exciting, makes a lot of sense. I also think about the way people around the world are waking up to the climate crisis and starting to respond. And it makes me think about those feedback mechanisms. Maybe we human beings are a bit sluggish to respond fast enough for our own species to avoid the fact we may suffer in decades. But Gaia will certainly survive and recover. Some people have called humanity a cancer on the earth, but I think this is unfair. We probably have some cancerous individuals we could stand to lose, but I think we have an important role to play. That article I read on planetary intelligence describes a thought experiment by some researchers at the University of Rochester and Arizona State University, imagining the stages of planetary evolution, if the collective actions of life in a planet's biosphere can be thought of as a form of planetary cognition. Like Lovelock, they were trying to imagine ways we could detect life on planets. What they proposed, there are 4 basic stages in the model. Stage 1 is an immature biosphere, long before technological species evolved, when natural forces dominate, a few global feedback mechanisms developed. Stage 2 is a mature biosphere, which is what Earth was like before humans evolved, began to use technology. A planet characterized by complex evolving natural feedback mechanisms. Stage 3 is what they called an immature technosphere, which is what we are now in, Earth. Though there are many technological systems, they are not well integrated, but instead draw matter and energy from Earth's system in ways that will drive the whole into a new state, likely doesn't include the technosphere itself. Our current technosphere is, in the long run, working against it. And finally, stage 4, a mature technosphere, is what they suggest should be the goal. It is characterized by technological systems in place that benefit the planet, globally harvesting energy in forms like solar that do not harm the biosphere. The mature technosphere is one that has co-evolved the biosphere into a form that allows both the technosphere and the biosphere to thrive. Me sound a lot like stages in the evolution of Gaia. And it sounds promising if we can avoid the pitfall possibilities. If we hope to get there as one of Gaia's constituent species, I think we need to promote a new perspective about the Earth so that more people will become invested. We can't all enjoy the view, but just seeing the photo made a huge impact on me. cultivating more awareness and education about Gaia can trigger those feelings that motivate us to act. Maybe the critics who say this is more of a neo-pagan religious movement than a scientific right, but perhaps that is what we need. I don't think it ultimately matters to embrace Gaia as a sentient being or as a series of interacting ecosystems. Long, heal, sacred sentence, web of life in the end. I pray can open our hearts filled with the chorus of life, that we will hear the voice of Gaia, which heart. Our closing hymn, number 10, for Blue Boat Home.
Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor nor port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companion, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, breathe the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
I want to mention that obviously one done by the U Church of the Blues in Moscow, Idaho. I must say I'm much better, and I'm available. Her voice is so. Closing words come from the Australian rainforest advocate John Seed, who's a wonderful person back in Providence years ago. We ask presence, spirit of Gaia, and pray that the breath of life continues to caress the planet home. May we grow into true understanding, a deep connection that inspires us to protect the tree on which and the water, soil, and atmosphere without which existence. May we turn inward and stumble upon our true roots in the intertwining biology of this exquisite planet. May nourishment and power pulse through these roots, and fierce determination continue the billion-year dance. May love well up and burst forth from our hearts. May there be a new dispensation of pure and powerful consciousness, and the charter to witness and facilitate the healing of the shattered biosphere. We ask for the presence of the Spirit of Gaia to be with us here. Reveal to us all that we need to see for our own highest good and for the highest good of all. We call upon the Spirit of evolution, miraculous force that inspires rocks and dust weave themselves into biology. You have stood by us for millions and billions of years. Do not forsake now. Empower us and awaken in us pure and dazzling you that can turn scales into feathers, seawater to blood, caterpillars to butterflies, metamorphose. Awaken in us powers that we need to survive the present crisis and evolve into more eons of our solar journey. Awaken in us a sense of who we truly are, a tiny ephemeral blossom on the tree of life. Make the purpose and destiny of that tree our own purpose and destiny. Fill each of us with love for our true self, which includes all of the creatures and plants and landscapes of the world. Fill us with a powerful urge for the well-being and unfolding of self. May we speak in all human counsel on behalf of the animals and plants and landscapes of the earth. May we shine with a pure inner passion that will spread rapidly through these. May we all awaken our true and only nature, none other than the nature of Gaia. We call upon the power that sustains the planets in their orbits, the wheels of our Milky Way in its 200 million year spiral, to imbue our personalities and our relationships with harmony, endurance, joy. Fill us with a sense of immense time, so that our brief, flickering lives reflect the work of vast, and also the millions of years of evolution, whose potential lies in our turn. O stars, lend us your burning passion. O silence, give weight to voice. We ask for the presence of the Spirit.
Now extinguish the palace with we extinguish the flame, not the light of truth, warmth of community, fire of carry in our hearts.